Folks, I wanted to bring your attention to an issue that I've been noticing and I think affects a lot of players, especially in lower end. And this is something that can really stunt someone's growth in chess. So this issue is very apparent to coaches, especially when you're looking over a student's games or just presenting a position and asking for their thoughts. And what often happens is when you present a position, even if it's a fairly sharp or tactical position, people have this tendency where they just want to come up with, the first move that comes to mind or the first move that makes sense. It doesn't really blunder anything. And then they just suggest that. And even if you tell them like, oh, this is a tactical position, you have a strong continuation here, try to find it. Even then, people essentially have this tendency to just try to be like, well, I would just go rook e1 here. And then that's it. They don't really try to calculate or visualize further. They just kind of end their analysis after one move. And so this thing, I think it's pretty bad. And I'm going to dub this issue, I'm going to call it Looks-Good-Itis, because essentially that's what I think is going on. I think people in general are more afraid of blundering than they are wanting to find the best or the strongest move. And so this leads them to playing overly safe chess, where they're just trying to make moves that they can't really be faulted for later. I was just trying to develop my pieces here, or I was just trying to control this square, just like very simple ideas and not really engaging with the tactics or the dynamics of the position. So sometimes this can be okay to do, especially in positions like this, where things are pretty quiet and there's multiple reasonable moves here for white. And there's definitely a lot to think about, but it certainly doesn't feel like a super sharp or tactical position. And I think players, they kind of get lulled into this false sense of security where they get positions like this. And, you could play h3 here as white, bishop e3, c3, lots of reasonable moves here for white. And which one you end up choosing maybe ultimately doesn't really matter that much. But the issue is that this kind of mindset then bleeds into other positions, and the players treat this kind of semi-quiet position and they use their kind of thought process here and then they apply it to all kinds of other positions. And so here's what's the problem. There's twofold. Number one, you probably will end up blundering more often because you're probably just not being concrete enough, especially in quiet positions where there always could be tactics lurking underneath the surface. You're much less likely to find them if you're in this kind of Looks-Good-Itis type of mindset. Number two, when the position does get sharp and tactical, and even if you realize that, your brain is just so used to just looking for that like natural intuitive move that you're still not going to be ready to really engage in the battle, start calculating, being concrete, analyzing multiple variations. And even if you have a lot of time on your clock, you're still going to be kind of pushed to just make that first kind of natural move that then makes sense. And so this is going to be a real big issue later on because things will get tactical and then your brain just won't be equipped or ready to do all of that analysis. So here's a sample problem for you. It's white to play. I'd encourage you to pause the video and try to figure out what you think white should do here. And yeah, this is exactly the type of case where I think a lot of players could go wrong very easily. We have an endgame here. White has an extra pawn with two rooks on the board for each. And there seems to be lots of candidate moves here for white in the position. Currently, black seems to be threatening the pawn on c2. And so white has a lot of options here. Rook to c7, defending the pawn. Rook to d7, attacking the d5 pawn, creating a threat of rook takes d5. You can also defend the pawn, rook a2, rook b2, c3, any of these moves are possible. But unless your choice was rook a to a7, you actually just lost the game. So what's going on here? Well, there is a hidden threat in the position. In addition to threatening rook takes c2, black actually had the much stronger, much more powerful threat of rook to g8 followed by rook to g4 checkmate. So rook a7 here is actually the only move that prevents this threat by tying black down to this f7 pawn. So here rook g8 would of course be met with rook takes f7 check, and then the king is forced onto the g file, and not only is black not getting their mate, but in fact here white is doing quite well. So of course the rook would have to stay tied down to f7. Black can play some other move like rook takes c2, and the position is basically equal. So this is actually a incredibly easy thing to blunder, and I can see so many players here, especially in a game, just playing the move rook to c7 or rook to c6, or let's say rook to d7 with the logic, all right, well, if black takes my pawn, then I'll take their pawn and I can keep an extra pawn. And that's what often happens in these positions. Whatever move you come up with, you come up with some kind of logical story for why that move makes sense. Oh, I should play rook c6 because this rook is already active on b7 and I shouldn't put it on c7. I should use the other rook. Or I should play rook to d7, right? Because I want to counterattack. Or I should play c3 because I want to defend the pawn on the third rank. It's so easy to just come up with any kind of logical idea that kind of makes sense to you in the moment and then just play the move. But if you're not being actually concrete and you're not recognizing that the opponent has a huge threat of rook to g8 followed by rook to g4, well, then it's very, very likely that you're going to miss the boat and, yeah, not be up to speed when it comes to the tactics. And just to finish off the line here, if white makes a move, let's say rook to d7 after rook to g8, like I mentioned, the issue is that white is now getting mated here with rook to g4. The only way to create an escape score would be this move e4, but this just doesn't save white. Black can take either way here, de, fe4, and white's king side is simply going to be collapsing. Rook takes f3 coming next, and so on. And so now black is just totally winning. And this kind of thing happens a lot. And believe me, not just to lower rated players, but to players of all levels. But the point is that stronger players, they tend to do this less. They have a more developed sense of danger. They realize there's always going to be tactics lurking in the position, and they know that they really have to be concrete every single move of the game. Now you might be saying, Kostya, that's not fair. You didn't tell me there was a tactic in this position. And no, I didn't tell you. That's exactly the point. I'm not going to tell you during the game either. No one will. Right? These tactics will come up from time to time. And I can really see someone, if this was someone's game and they played some move, rook c6, and then up losing after rook to g8, in their mind, they might have told themselves like, oh, well, I blundered this tactical thing. I got to work more on my tactics and calculation. That might also be true, but I would say this is more of a mindset thing, right? If you're getting into the habit of playing moves kind of quickly and intuitively, not spending a lot of time in classical chess, just making moves 30 seconds here, 45 seconds here, you still have an hour on your clock. These types of blunders will happen a lot more often than someone who's taking their time, who realizes that there could always be something concrete going on, and really spending their time to make sure that they're kind of putting their best concrete and tactical foot forward. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to just stop blundering all the time if you do this, but I think you will end up blundering less if you really work to put yourself into a more concrete mindset. And I think what happens for some folks is that they just end up playing way too much blitz and rapid chess. And here's the thing, in blitz and rapid, all this advice I'm giving isn't exactly great. In blitz and rapid chess, you do have to play quickly. You do have to play more intuitively. And that's what I think happens is you play too much of this speed chess, and then you get into this habit where you're just kind of always just making the natural move, not really investing a lot of time to calculate. But of course, this is not going to go very far in classical chess. But let me say this, even in blitz and rapid, the point of playing quickly, let's say out of the opening or in the early middle game, the reason that you do want to play quickly early on is to get a time advantage on your opponent so that when the game does get tactical in blitz or rapid, you have a little bit more time to be concrete and use that time to analyze the position. So it's like even in speed chess, it's like you don't just want to be blitzing out your moves the whole game and always just playing natural moves. You do want to be playing quickly out of the gate, but it's only so that you can then use your time later when the situation is really critical. There might only be one winning move for you or one winning combination. And yeah, if you don't invest that time there, you won't have any chance of finding it. So even in blitz and rapid, it's important to know when it's time to slow down and think. So let me give you guys another example here. This is actually a fantastic game by the great grandmaster F.M. Geller, who had some very, very instructive games. I would highly recommend studying the games of Geller. Here, this was his position with white against Portish, who as black had just played this move, knight to a5. And yeah, this would be a great exercise. White does have a very strong continuation here. If you like to pause the video and try to find it, I definitely encourage you to spend at least a couple minutes. But if you just want to keep watching the video, that's also fine. All right, so let's take a look at this position. Again, it's a great exercise either for yourself or possibly for students when it comes to choosing candidate moves and figuring out what to do. So black had just played this move, knight a5, hitting the bishop on b3, which is of course a strong piece. And I think there are many players here. I've given this position to lots of students, and even telling them, there's something tactical here. Some of them end up suggesting, like, well, maybe I'll just go bishop to c2, just saving the bishop. And yeah, in many cases, in many positions, bishop c2 would be a perfectly reasonable move here, keeping the bishop alive, defending, overprotecting the e4 pawn, and so on and so forth. You might also be able to convince yourself that bishop d5 is reasonable, trying to trade off the bishops or what have you. Now let's take a look at other moves in the position. Now another very, very tempting move, in fact, maybe even more tempting than bishop c2, especially knowing that this is like a tactical puzzle, be the move knight f5. And I've certainly had lots of students suggest this move, and this is exactly the kind of move that looks good, but's wrong. Looks good, but not best. We're getting the knight into the game, we're hitting the queen with tempo. If this was your bullet game, I would think knight f5 looks great. If this is a blitz game, I would think, yeah, knight f5 looks good. But in classical chess, here black goes queen to f6, and now white would have to find some way to follow up. And at this point, there might not be anything so sharp or so great, nothing better than just dropping back the bishop, and okay, game continues, and black is going to be all right. So yeah, knight f5 looks good, but again, not best. The move that Geller ended up playing, which of course is the strongest move and ends up winning by force, is the move bishop to g5. Really a fantastic move, very, very surprising. This move is not actually the hardest to calculate, but it's quite difficult to come up with the idea for obvious reasons. The bishop is hanging. If you're a decent enough player, your brain usually doesn't suggest moves that like just hang pieces right directly to pawns. But of course, there's some tactical justification here. Now, I think the way he might have come up with this idea is actually by analyzing the move knight to g6. And this is another reason why spending time really analyzing the position is so useful, because it might give you hints as to what to do. Maybe he considered the move knight to g6 using the pin along the diagonal, hitting the queen. But after the move queen to f6, it seems like white doesn't really have any great follow-up here. We can trade on f8, but really no big deal there. And so the idea behind bishop to g5 is that if black takes this one with the pawn, well, here white gets knight to g6, and now queen h8 is an unstoppable mating threat, again using this devastating pin along the diagonal. So I think that's maybe where the logic behind the move came from, like how a strong player might start to consider such a move, despite the fact that, okay, it is a forcing move and could just naturally be checked. The other justification is that if queen takes g5, well, here queen takes f7 is hanging, and then anywhere the king moves, white has queen to g8 mate, using the fact that the knight is covering g6. So let me just be clear here. Bishop g5, not an easy move to find. It's not a move you're going to find automatically if you spend 5-10 minutes and really push yourself. Even if you're a very good player, it's definitely a move that you can miss. But it's only by spending time and actually trying and putting in effort that we give ourselves the chance to find some of these fantastic tactical shots. And, who knows, it might even be doable. Again, the calculation here is actually not that difficult. Right, the lines aren't that long. Hg knight to g6, game over. Queen takes g5, queen takes f7 is mate in 2. Right, so it's not like that hard to calculate this move. I think the harder thing here is just considering the move in the first place, just realizing that it's possible, forcing your brain to give it a chance, and forcing yourself to analyze some of the variations. So let me show you guys quickly just how the game ended in case you're curious. Black played queen d7, just getting out of the attack. White followed up with rook a d1, definitely a very nice move, getting another tempo on the queen and getting the rook in. Here black played bishop to d6, and now Geller continued the fiery attacking style with bishop takes h6. Very, very nice sacrifice. This one wins on the spot. White's threatening to take on g7 and just open up black's king even further. So for example, if black were to throw in knight takes b3 here, then bishop takes g7 is a very strong way of ending the game. King takes g7, the idea is knight f5 check, and now white's queen is coming in to deliver a typical mate. So after bishop takes h6, black took the bishop, but now white gets queen g6 check, once again using the pin. Black played king to f8. Here, queen takes h6 check is perfectly good enough. I can imagine a lot of players playing this one, right? Especially in blitz and rapid. Okay, take a pawn with check, looks good. What could be the issue? But Geller plays queen f6. Both moves were good. I like this move as well. Keeping the king cut off, setting up knight f5, queen g7. You could argue that this move is even cleaner from white's point of view. Black tried king to g8 here with the intention of maybe getting the bishop back to f8 at some point. Of course, there's this pin, so black really doesn't have a lot of defensive resources here. White played rook e3, and the game was simply over. Black resigned here, as now white is ready to mate with rook g3 check coming next. So fantastic game by Geller here. Yeah, the attack is just decisive, and you could say, okay, he was a tactical genius, attacking, monster, all this stuff. But the only way you even get to this level is by challenging yourself, right? By trying to calculate moves, trying to calculate lines, trying to visualize further. I get that this is very difficult for players when they're starting out, but it's exactly why I'm making this video, because I think it's such an important topic. And I think, too many of us, right? We just want to be like, it'd be great if we were all Magnus Carlsen and, we can just elegantly, play moves with our hand and just pluck amazing moves out of like thin air, right? And just make it all work at the chessboard. But even for Magnus, even for very, very strong players, where it seems like they play blitz at really high levels and the moves just kind of flow out, we would all just be able to look at a position, evaluate one or two strategic factors, and just come up with a good move and then just play chess one move at a time. But it simply doesn't work like that. Chess is a concrete game. There's tactics, there's dynamics, there's sacrifices. And even for a strong player, when they play a move that looks good, they've actually probably already calculated multiple lines justifying that move. So they're not just looking half a move ahead or one move ahead. They've already calculated a little bit. They've already looked at some tactical details. So for a strong player, when they play a move that looks good, they've already actually spent a little bit of time and energy actually analyzing the position. And that's definitely what I would encourage you folks to strive for as well, to at least do a little bit more analysis than you're doing now. So how do you break out of this? Okay, you've been watching and you're on your knees, you're saying, Kostya, I get it. I'm sorry, I'm begging you, help me. What do I do? How do you break out of this issue? All right, number one, admit you have a problem. Awareness is key. Number two, when you're playing classical chess from now on, try to spend more time. Try to be more concrete. Even if the situation feels very strategic or positional, just try to spend a little bit more time than you would naturally do. Once you come up with a move, once you choose a move, it looks good, really try to figure out how the opponent is going to respond to it, right? Just start trying to calculate one move ahead, two moves ahead. Try to figure out how will you respond to your opponent, or maybe you could do something else. Start looking for more options. So don't just consider the first move and then end up playing it. Consider multiple options for yourself. Consider multiple options for the opponent. This is very hard. You're not going to be able to just immediately, analyze a ton right off the bat. But the point is, it's a skill. It's a skill that you work on and you try to build up, the skill of analysis. And number three, review your games. Review the moments where you spend time and look at what you analyzed and what you looked at concretely. Was your analysis correct? Did you miss a lot of ideas? That's fine. Try to learn from it. Also, pay attention to your blunders. Keep track of the time usage. When you blundered, did you spend a lot of time? Were you playing quickly up to that point? Or did you spend a lot of time on the blunder? Because those are two very, very different things. If you play quickly and you blunder, that's one thing. But if you spend 15 minutes analyzing a position and then you end up blundering anyway, well, okay, that's a sign that, yeah, maybe you do need to work more on your tactics, right? If you're already spending a lot of time and you're still missing like really simple tactical ideas and you feel like you're blundering a lot, yeah, that's a very clear sign. It's time to work specifically on the tactics. But a lot of times what I see, it's not the tactics necessarily. Sure, the tactics could be improved. It's really actually just the time usage. It's the effort, just not putting in enough time and effort at the board to really try and maximize your chances, really trying to play the most critical moves rather than just the moves that feel safe. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll wish you the best of luck in your future games. Take care.